Welcome to IELTS CELPEEP MasterPrep, your trusted source for real exam-based practice tests. Every test you see here is inspired by current exam trends, and each one comes with full model solutions to help you master every section. Here's our daily schedule. IELTS tests drop every morning at 7:30 a.m. Eastern, and CLP tests every evening at 5:30 p.m. Eastern. No matter which exam you're preparing for, we've got you covered every single day. Are you ready for today's test? Give it your best shot and comment your score. The top 5 scorers will be featured in our monthly Achievers newsletter and awards. Want your name included? Let's begin.
Conversation 1. You will hear a conversation. A female student visits her academic advisor to discuss changing her major from biology to environmental science. First, you have some time to look at the 5 questions. Now listen carefully and answer the questions. Hi, Dr. Richardson. Thanks for seeing me on such short notice. I know your office hours are pretty packed this week.
No problem, Laura. I always try to make time. So, what's on your mind?
Well, I've been thinking a lot about this, and I want to switch my major from biology to environmental science. I took Professor Hayward's Introduction to Environmental Systems course last semester, and it really opened my eyes.
That's interesting. You know, a lot of students who take that course feel the same way. Professor Hayward has a real gift for making the material come alive. But let me ask you, have you thought about what this change would mean for your graduation timeline?
That's actually one of the main reasons I'm here. I'm worried I might have to stay an extra semester, and I really can't afford that financially.
Okay, let's take a look. Pull up a chair. So, you've completed, let me see, 62 credits so far. The good news is that there's quite a bit of overlap between the two programs. Your general chemistry sequence, your statistics course, and even your ecology elective, those all transfer directly into the environmental science requirements.
Oh, that's a relief. What about my cell biology and genetics courses? I spent so much time on those.
Well, here's the thing, they won't count toward the core requirements in environmental science, but they can be applied as general electives. So the credits aren't wasted, they just won't fulfill specific program requirements. You'd still need to pick up courses in environmental policy, geographic information systems, GIS, and a capstone research seminar.
GIS actually sounds really exciting. I've heard students in that program get to do fieldwork with the County Conservation Office.
They do, and honestly, that's one of the strongest parts of the program. The hands-on experience is invaluable for the job market. Now, if you load your schedule carefully, maybe take one summer course, I think we can keep you on track to graduate in 4 years.
One summer course doesn't sound too bad at all. So, what do I need to do to make it official?
You'll need to fill out a change of major form, you can find it on the registrar's website, and get a signature from the Environmental Science Department Chair, Dr. Patel. I'd recommend setting up a meeting with her soon. She likes to sit down with incoming students and map out a personalized study plan.
That sounds great. I'll email her today. Thank you so much, Dr. Richardson. I feel a lot better about this now.
Happy to help, Laura. And look, if you hit any snags with the paperwork or scheduling, just come back and see me. That's what I'm here for.
That is the end of the conversation 1. You now have some time to answer the questions. Conversation 2. You will hear a conversation. A male student visits the financial aid office to inquire about maintaining his scholarship after a drop in his GPA. First, you have some time to look at the 5 questions. Now listen carefully and answer the questions.
Excuse me, are you Miss Thornton? I was told you're the person to talk to about scholarship questions.
That's me. Come on in. What's your name?
I'm Kevin Park. I'm a junior, majoring in mechanical engineering. I'm here because I got an email saying my merit scholarship is under review, and honestly, it kind of freaked me out.
Okay, Kevin, let's not panic. Let me pull up your file. So, the Provost's Excellence Scholarship, that requires you to maintain a cumulative GPA of 3.2 or above. It looks like after this past fall semester, your GPA dropped to 3.15. That's what triggered the review.
Yeah, I figured. Last semester was really tough. I was taking thermodynamics and advanced calculus at the same time, plus I was dealing with some family issues back home. I know that's not really an excuse, but...
Kevin, I appreciate you being upfront about that. And actually, extenuating circumstances can matter here. The scholarship committee does consider personal hardships when they review cases like yours. Do you have any documentation? A letter from a doctor or a dean, anything like that?
I did talk to the Dean of Students' office last October. They have a record of it because I requested a deadline extension for one of my courses.
Good, that helps. Now, here's how the review process works. You're currently in what we call a probationary period. You have this current spring semester to bring your GPA back up to 3.2. If you do, the scholarship continues as normal with no interruption in funding. If you don't quite reach 3.2 but show significant improvement, the committee may grant a 1-semester extension.
And if I don't improve enough?
Then, unfortunately, the scholarship would be revoked starting next fall. But let's focus on the positive here. You only need to raise your GPA by 0.05 of a point. That's very achievable. How are your grades looking this semester?
Actually, they're looking pretty good. I think I'm pulling an A- in my materials science course and at least a B+ in everything else. I also dropped down to 15 credits instead of 18, so I can really focus.
Smart move. That should make a real difference. Now, I also want to make sure you know about some other resources. Have you looked into the Departmental Tutoring Center? Engineering students can get free peer tutoring there, and they also run exam review sessions.
I actually started going there this semester. It's been a huge help, especially for my dynamics course.
Wonderful. And one more thing, even if the worst-case scenario happens with this scholarship, you would still be eligible to apply for need-based aid or alternative merit awards. So you wouldn't necessarily be left without any support.
That's really good to know. I was honestly losing sleep over this. So, to confirm, I just need to get my GPA back to 3.2 by the end of this semester, and everything goes back to normal?
Exactly. And I'd recommend writing a brief personal statement for the committee file explaining what happened last semester and what steps you've taken to get back on track. It shows initiative, and the committee responds well to that.
I'll definitely do that. Thank you so much, Ms. Thornton. This has been incredibly helpful.
You're welcome, Kevin. I have a good feeling about this. Just keep doing what you're doing. That is the end of the conversation too. You now have some time to answer the questions. Lecture 1. You will hear part of a lecture about astronomy. Neutron star properties. First, you have some time to look at the 6 questions. Now listen carefully and answer the questions.
Today we're going to talk about one of the most extreme objects in the universe, neutron stars. These are the collapsed remnants of massive stars that have exploded as supernovae. What's left behind is an incredibly dense core, typically only about 20 kilometers in diameter, yet containing roughly 1.4 to 2 times the mass of our Sun. Now, to put that density in perspective, a single teaspoon of neutron star material would weigh about 6 billion tons on Earth. The gravitational pull at the surface is around 2 billion times stronger than Earth's gravity. These stars are composed almost entirely of neutrons, subatomic particles packed so tightly together that the star behaves, in some ways, like a single enormous atomic nucleus. One of the most fascinating properties of neutron stars is their rotation. When the original star collapses, conservation of angular momentum causes the neutron star to spin extremely rapidly. Some neutron stars, called pulsars, rotate hundreds of times per second and emit beams of electromagnetic radiation from their magnetic poles. If those beams happen to sweep across Earth, we detect regular pulses, hence the name pulsar.
Student, Professor, you mentioned the magnetic poles. How strong are the magnetic fields of neutron stars compared to, say, Earth's?
Great question. Neutron star magnetic fields are astonishingly powerful, typically around 1 trillion times stronger than Earth's magnetic field. And there's a subclass called magnetars whose fields can be 1,000 times stronger still. These magnetar fields are so intense they can actually distort the shapes of atoms and affect the vacuum of space itself. In fact, magnetars occasionally produce enormous bursts of gamma rays and X-rays that we can detect from across the galaxy. Now, another key property worth discussing is the internal structure. The outer crust of a neutron star is a rigid lattice of iron nuclei and electrons, somewhat like a conventional solid. But as you go deeper, the matter transitions into a superfluid, a state where neutrons flow with zero viscosity. This superfluid interior is believed to be responsible for a phenomenon called glitches, where a pulsar's rotation rate suddenly increases slightly before gradually returning to normal. These glitches give us indirect evidence of what's happening beneath the surface.
That is the end of the lecture 1. You now have some time to answer the questions. Lecture 2. You will hear part of a lecture about history. Silk Road trade networks. First, you have some time to look at the 6 questions. Now listen carefully and answer the questions.
Let's dive into one of the most important commercial networks in human history, the Silk Road. Now, first I want to clear up a common misconception. The Silk Road wasn't a single road at all. It was a vast, interconnected web of overland and maritime routes stretching from China in the east to the Mediterranean in the west, covering roughly 6,500 kilometers. And it operated, in various forms, from about the 2nd century BCE through the 15th century CE. The name Silk Road was actually coined by a German geographer, Ferdinand von Richthofen, in 1877. And while silk was certainly one of the most famous commodities traded, the network carried an enormous variety of goods. From east to west, merchants transported silk, porcelain, tea, spices, and jade. Going the other direction, from west to east, you'd find gold, silver, glassware, wool textiles, and horses. Central Asian cities like Samarkand and Bokhara became hugely prosperous as middlemen in this exchange.
Student, Professor Nakamura, was it mostly the same merchants traveling the entire route, or did goods change hands along the way?
That's a really important point, and it gets at something many people misunderstand. Very few merchants ever traveled the full length of the Silk Road. Instead, goods typically changed hands multiple times through a relay system. A Chinese merchant might carry silk to Dunhuang, where a Central Asian trader would buy it and transport it to Samarkand. There, a Persian merchant might acquire it and bring it further west. Each intermediary added costs, which is why silk and spices were so expensive by the time they reached Rome or Constantinople. But what I really want to emphasize is that the Silk Road wasn't just about trade in physical goods. It was a conduit for the exchange of ideas, religions, technologies, and even diseases. Buddhism spread from India to China largely along Silk Road routes. Islam later spread into Central and Southeast Asia through the same networks. Papermaking technology moved westward from China, eventually reaching Europe. And tragically, the Black Death of the 14th century is believed to have traveled along Silk Road trade routes from Central Asia to Europe, killing tens of millions. The decline of the overland Silk Road came in stages. The rise of maritime trade routes in the 15th century offered cheaper, faster alternatives. The Ottoman Empire's expansion also disrupted traditional overland paths and imposed heavy tariffs. These factors combined to shift the center of global commerce towards sea-based networks, eventually spurring the European age of exploration.
That is the end of the lecture 2. You now have some time to answer the questions. Lecture 3. You will hear part of a lecture about architecture. Gothic cathedral design. First, you have some time to look at the 6 questions. Now listen carefully and answer the questions.
Today I'd like to examine one of the most remarkable architectural achievements of the medieval period, the Gothic cathedral. Gothic architecture emerged in 12th century France and dominated European church construction for roughly 400 years. What set it apart from the earlier Romanesque style was a radical new approach to structure, one that allowed builders to create soaring interior spaces flooded with light. The key innovation was the pointed arch. Unlike the rounded Roman arch, the pointed arch directs weight more efficiently downward, which means the walls don't have to bear as much lateral thrust. This seemingly simple geometric change had enormous consequences. It allowed architects to build much taller naves and to open up wall space that had previously been needed for structural support. And what did they do with that freed-up wall space? They filled it with enormous stained glass windows. But the pointed arch alone wasn't enough. Gothic builders also developed the ribbed vault, a ceiling structure where stone ribs carry the load and the spaces between are filled with thinner, lighter stone panels. This reduced the overall weight of the ceiling dramatically. Combined with the pointed arch, the ribbed vault made it possible to span wider and taller interior spaces than ever before. Notre Dame de Paris, for example, has a nave vault reaching about 33 meters, an astonishing height for 12th century construction.
Student, but if the walls are thinner and taller, wouldn't the whole structure be less stable? How did they keep the buildings from collapsing outward?
Exactly the right question. That's where the flying buttress comes in, arguably the most visually distinctive feature of Gothic cathedrals. A flying buttress is an external arch that transfers the lateral thrust from the upper walls and roof down to a heavy pier set away from the building. Essentially, the structural support is moved to the outside. If you look at a cathedral like Chartres or Notre Dame from the exterior, you'll see these elegant arched supports reaching out from the walls. They're doing critical structural work. Without them, those tall, thin walls with their massive windows would indeed buckle and collapse. Now, it's important to understand that these 3 elements, pointed arches, ribbed vaults, and flying buttresses, work together as an integrated structural system. None of them alone would have been sufficient. The genius of Gothic architecture was in combining them so that each element reinforced the others. This system also freed interior columns from bearing excessive loads, so columns could become more slender and elegant, further enhancing the sense of height and openness that the cathedrals were designed to evoke, a space meant to inspire awe and draw the eye and the spirit upward toward the heavens.
That is the end of the Lecture 3. You now have some time to answer the questions. That is the end of the TOEFL iBT listening test. You now have some time to review your answers.
Before you go, don't forget to like this video, share it with other test takers, and subscribe so you never miss your daily IELTS and CELPEP tests. Drop your score in the comments. Your name could be featured in our monthly Achievers newsletter. Stay consistent, stay focused, and keep leveling up with MasterPrep.